Again, I appreciate the privilege to be here to share and learn, and I have no relevant conflicts. So fibromatosis or Dupuytren's is a fairly common condition affecting folks of Northern European ancestry, and it comes in a lot of different presentations, if you will, and unfortunately it's while it's tended to be painless, and thankfully it's benign. There's no cure. So it's one thing I've learned is to sort of help patients understand expectations and temper expectations, especially in light of some of the newer treatments. And I hate to say the word newer because some of these newer treatments are actually over 20 years old. We don't know a whole lot about its etiology, although you could probably fill this room with literature on theories and ideas and links, but basically we know two things. It's genetic, and men are more affected than women. There's this fibroblast that becomes a differentiated myofibroblast, which appears to be the culprit that creates the contracture. And the myofibroblast, as it proliferates, tends to have an unfortunate tendency to contract. And that's what we think is the tether that limits their motion. And by way of treatments, I think I like to classify them as two types, basically. You have office-based treatments, needle aponeurotomy, and collagenase, and then you have surgery, which is probably still the gold standard by many measures. And a lot of this is to, of course, correct the contracture, which tends to be the main reason patients are in need of intervention. Occasionally I'll see patients who come in with a nodule that's early disease and they're not sure what it is, but typically those are not symptomatic. Of course, you want to minimize complications. And while recurrence is always there as an expectation, having a detailed discussion on how much recurrence the patient's willing to tolerate with the trade-off of a procedure that's going to be a quicker recovery and back to life as normal. There are adjuvant treatments, radiation therapy, which we have incorporated in some cases after needle aponeurotomy or even after surgery, but typically described for early disease. Salvage options, I will put a plug in for the dynamic external extension devices. To me, those are really helpful as an adjunctive to surgery. And also, in some cases, needle aponeurotomy. It's important, I think, to have patient expectations tempered. Recurrence is an expectation. PIP joints, particularly in the small finger, are bad actors, and they're frustrating to sort of manage. And tempering expectations really helps you cope with those realities. And of course, there are surgeon factors that deal with the treatments. How comfortable are you with the particular treatment options? What's your experience in training? What resources do you have? Some of these are costly interventions, and it's important to have that in mind. And how can you contend with complications and recurrence? This is the needle aponeurotomy procedure, and I'll just outline fairly quickly. This is a fairly benign contracture, not too severe, but it illustrates the procedure fairly well. And basically, I typically use lidocaine with epinephrine just at the skin, enough to anesthetize the skin, about an evenly spaced interval, about 1 centimeter apart. And then I'll get to work with the needle while holding the finger extended to make the cord taut. I typically use a 19-gauge needle in the palm and a 22-gauge needle in the finger, and you can either sweep, it's all based on feel, or a sewing machine type motion. And you progressively work your way down the hand and asking the patients if they feel electrical shock sensations, indicating that maybe we're irritating the nerve as we needle, so it helps us to redirect the cord. And effectively, then you break the cord. And as you work more, you keep trying to work on breaking the cord, feeling the cord as you forcibly extend. And in these cases, it's more or less a progressive release, not so much a single release, although that does happen at times. And when you're done, the patient can fully extend. You apply Band-Aids. Many of them do go numb over time, and just reassure them that hopefully that'll get better. If it doesn't, then you can discuss with them what they think we need to do. And I've done probably 1,200 of these now, and I haven't gone back, even though I've had patients who've had numbness, I haven't, none of them have ever taken me up on the offer to go back and look at the, at the nerve. That said, none of them have been completely numb, just partially. And I do splint them post-operatively with a nighttime static splint and a daytime LMB for 30 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a day. And the rehab is very similar to the collagenase, which I'll talk about in a second. My personal experience is the ideal cord for needle aponeurotomy is a thin cord that's central, subcutaneous, and mainly in the palm. Collagenase became approved in 2010 in the United States. It's called Xiaflex is the brand name. And basically, it's a combination of 2 enzymes to dissolve the cord and weaken it. And it's a 2-day event. For us, we inject where the cord is most taut. We try not to go too far past the MP flexion crease because you run the risk of weakening the tendon and rupturing the tendon. And then patient comes back the next day or within a few days, and then you effectively manipulate and break the cord. And these are more of an audible break, although sometimes patients will come back, depending on the delay in intervention, with some ratcheting that they've had. And here's a case example of a woman who underwent injection with the Band-Aid that day and came back, had an excellent release, and this is her about a month after the collagenase. Comparative studies between needle aponeurotomy and collagenase basically say that there's no superiority of one over the other. Basically, they're equal. Surgery again remains the gold standard. It's something that I've gone doing more of as I do a lot of office-based interventions. And you can see the cord very nicely in these diagrams and effectively release it pretty well. Surgery, unfortunately, when it does recur, has a more complex profile and a much more complicated course in managing after, although it does give you a longer disease-free interval. Again, the digital widgets, I think, can be helpful with these dynamic extension devices and really severe contractures and can really do a good job as an adjunct to helping with motion. In summary, I'm just going to highlight our experience from a Journal of Hand Surgery article in 2019 looking at 450 almost needle aponeurotomies, 272 collagenase cases, and 130 surgeries. We found that the rates of repeat intervention were highest with collagenase at 2 years, were pretty similar between needle aponeurotomy and collagenase at 5 years, and the mean time to repeat intervention was 1.8 years with needle aponeurotomy and a little less than that for collagenase. We did find also that repeat interventions by type, most of the people who had the original intervention underwent the same intervention as a repeat, but the costs were interesting. If you include recurrence, the collagenase was more expensive than even surgery, which was interesting. So we concluded from this study that collagenase had the highest reintervention at 2 years, equaled with needle aponeurotomy at 5 years at a higher overall cost. Needle aponeurotomy was the cheapest option with a higher reintervention rate than fasciectomy, but equal to collagenase, and fasciectomy had the lowest overall intervention rate and a lower cost than collagenase at 5 years. Thank you.